He's an auxiliary bishop in Kazakhstan and a staunch defender of the traditional church teaching. Last week, I spoke to him at length about the Pachamama idol controversy and the Amazon Synod, and his new book with journalist Diane Montagna, Christus Vincit, Christ's Triumph Over the Darkness of the Age. This week, I'm pleased to bring you part 2 of this very important interview with Bishop Athanasius Schneider. Take a look. Your Excellency, you spend a chapter in the book, Christus Vincit, discussing secularism and this new dictatorship, which I would suspect is responsible for much of what we've been discussing, the ambiguity in the church, the ambiguity and the confusion we see. This is what you write. Now we have reached a peak of secularism, of this complete independence of man, of this enormous anthropocentrism, where everyone decides for himself what is true and what is good or evil. Such secularism brings us a horrible and cruel society. We are witnessing this. It is cruel. And what is the result? Egoism. Secularism leads to egoism. We have now reached a peak of egoism, and egoism is cruel. Only I and no one else. Where does this lead? This idea, this thinking, this pervasive movement in society, and how is this related to Benedict XVI's dictatorship of relativism?
Yes, maybe we can go back further. This secularism and anthropocentrism is, to my opinion, the core of sin itself. Because when Adam and Eve sinned, they want to be without God. And so this is secularism, without God. We alone, God no. We exclude God. And this is the core of every sin. And this is the continuous temptation of man individually and collectively to exclude God, or from their personal life or the social life. But there cannot be a vacuum. When you exclude God, you have to put something in this place.
In it.
And these are idols. And therefore, the entire humanity lived in idolatry. And this was the gravest sin in the Jews, the Hebrew people. And all the prophets continuously fought against this deep sin. But then Christ redeemed us from all sins, but especially from this gravest sin of idolatry, of secularism.
When you were last here, we spoke about the interreligious dialogue, particularly the Abu Dhabi document, which I'll get to in a moment. In the book, you spend a chapter, an entire chapter, devoted to Islam and the de-Christianization of Europe. And you write this: for several years now in Europe, we have been witnessing a massive influx and presence of Islam, and its effect is supplanting and, in some cases, overtly opposing what remains of Christian European culture. But since the recent war in Syria, the influx of Muslims into Europe has been, at least in part, organized by those who plan to Islamicize Europe. And to Islamicize Europe means practically to destroy Christianity in the region, to de-Christianize Europe. What's to be gained by de-Christianizing Europe? By whom?
The only one religion, as we already said, the only true one religion willed by God, it is the Catholic Church, the Catholic, the Christianity. And this is the only one religion which is supernatural. Supernatural. To give God the place, the central place, the true God, this is Jesus Christ, the incarnate God, in our life, in the public life. And so, the secularism, starting in the 18th century, specifically then supported and spread with the Freemasonic ideology and political powers, was to eliminate Christianity, or at least the influence of the light of Christ in the public life. And they did this throughout 200 years, and now Europe is practically not more Christian in the public life, and in this vacuum now is coming the Islam. And this is also a strategical movement to use the Islam to further de-Christianize Europe, which already was de-Christianized through the secularism in the European countries.
And we need to talk about the other, as I said a moment ago, we talked about that Abu Dhabi statement that the Pope signed earlier this year. In it he says, or the document says, the pluralism and the diversity of religions, color, sex, race, and language are willed by God in his wisdom. Does God really will that kind of pluralism, religious pluralism, other religions?
Of course, no. This is a contradiction to the entire divine revelation. God said in the first commandment, you shall not have other gods. And this was the constant appeal of the prophets in the Old Testament. And Jesus Christ also said, there is no other way than I. I am the way only. Jesus said, I am the truth. And so this statement contradicts divine revelation to say that God wills the diversity of religions. So this is contradicting the entire revelation completely, and opens the door even to this movement which we are now witnessing in Europe, to welcoming the spread of the Islamic religion. According to the statement of this phrase in the Abu Dhabi document, God wills the diversity and pluralism of religion, so God wills also the Pachamama religion with their cult. It was a logical consequence. And so we see we have to go again back to the roots and reject this phrase in this statement or similar statements as contradicting divine revelation.
Another subject you cover in your book is the doctrinal confusion, which we have been seeing over the last few years here. I want you to react to a point in the book where you talk about decentralization. Here's the quote. There can be no decentralization in doctrinal matters, otherwise the Catholic Church would be transformed into countless doctrinally different Christian denominations, as we can see occur daily in the Protestant world. There can be a decentralization in pastoral approaches, which of course always have to be in conformity with doctrine. How do you square that with the synodal approach to governance that we're seeing coming out of Rome?
Yes, we have to clarify what does mean synodal.
Yes.
It is, to my opinion, only a means to promote an agenda, a specific agenda.
Which agenda?
The agenda to Protestantize the Catholic Church further and to introduce new doctrines and new practices in the Church, as we already mentioned, in the Synod of the Amazon, the abolition of the priestly celibacy or the introduction of a female diaconate, and so on. And the equality and diversity of all religions. This is a further step, and they only use the word synodality for this aim.
You talk about the loss of the supernatural in the book. You dedicate a whole chapter to that as well. How important is it to recover a sense of the supernatural, and why has it been lost? People clearly want it. I see it when I speak to children in schools. They have a very refined sense of the supernatural. You have to almost beat it out of them. What has happened to us as a society and the Church?
Yes, supernatural is God himself. His divine life is supernatural. By definition, creature and creatures are natural, not supernatural. This is the basic difference between God and the creature, the supernatural. And the greatest gift and mercy of God was that he was so condescending to us, to invite us, feeble, humble creatures, from our nature, simple nature, to go to this other level of life and knowledge in his life, his own divine life. This is supernatural, to give us a part, to take part in his own life. And so the Amazon Synod was the contrary of the gospel, because the main impact and stress was put on the material aspects of the nature, of the temporal, so not of the supernatural.
Yeah. Before I let you go, you talk here about reforming the church at the end of the book. What would be your recommendations to reform the College of Cardinals?
We have to reform, of course, the College of Cardinals with men who are true men of God, who are true apostles, who have the purity, integrity of the Catholic and apostolic faith, as it is called in the canon of the Mass. We have to renew the College of Cardinals with men who are in some way 100% sure in the purity and integrity of the Catholic faith and also in moral life.
What would be your advice to the layman watching tonight, considering all that's coming out of Rome now and that they're hearing in their own communities and around the world?
First, I would say, dear brothers and sisters from the laity, I thank you very much as a bishop for your fidelity, which you have kept in these dark times. Please keep this fidelity and read good the catechism, which you know, better the old catechism, because this is clear and simple and reflects the gospel. And this is one advice to you. And the other, to pray in family, to pray the rosary, to make hours of reparation for the sins of the high clergy who betray today Christ. And also to pray for good new priests and to support good bishops who are still are, that they have courage and strength and wisdom to be faithful shepherds in these dark times.
Christus Vincit, Christ's Triumph Over the Darkness of the Age by Bishop Athanasius Schneider is available at bookstores everywhere, online, and through EWTN's religious catalog at EWTNRC.com.